A man who was once the undisputed lightweight champion of the world says that when he beat Lomachenko, the greatest technician of his generation, he went home with $460,000. 4 years later, that same man wrote a check for $2,350,000, 5 times what he says that night was worth to him, to buy a fight he was never going to be in. He lost. But that is not the strange part of this story. The strange part is what happened to the man who won that money instead. He looked at $2,137,500, more than he has ever earned for anything in his life, and he said no. So here's the question we're going to spend the next 20 minutes answering. What is a world championship fight actually worth? Because over 4 days at the end of July, 3 fighters put 3 completely different prices on the exact same night of boxing. One of them called it the opportunity of a lifetime, one of them called it an insult, and one of them tried to buy it outright with his own company's money. All 3 of them walked away with nothing. You're watching All Sport Profit, where we follow the money that the broadcast never mentions, and the money in this one leads somewhere nobody in boxing wants to talk about. Let's set the board because the timeline here matters more than almost anything else. On Thursday, July 30th, 2026, in a conference room at the headquarters of the World Boxing Organization in San Juan, Puerto Rico, sealed envelopes were opened. Inside those envelopes were bids, not for a company, not for a stadium, for the right to promote one fight, a mandatory defense of the WBO welterweight title. The champion was Devin Haney, 33 fights, 33 wins, 15 by knockout, a 3-division world champion who took that welterweight belt off Brian Norman Jr. in Riyadh in November of 2025. The mandatory challenger was Keyshawn Davis, 15 wins, no losses, 1 no contest, 10 knockouts, an Olympic silver medalist, a former WBO lightweight champion. 2 envelopes were submitted, only 2, top rank 1 with $8,550,000. Now, that is a real number. That is not a small fight. $8.5 million is more than most world title fights on American soil generate in guaranteed purses. Under the rules of the auction, the money splits 75-25. Champion takes 3/4, challenger takes 1/4. It does not matter who wins the bid, it does not matter how big the number is. 75-25. So Devin Haney was guaranteed $6,412,500. And Keyshawn Davis was guaranteed $2,137,500. The fight was targeted for October 3rd. Everyone in that room walked out believing they had just made a championship fight. On Friday, the next day, Keyshawn Davis told the WBO he wasn't taking it. One day, that's how long that fight existed. We're going to come back to exactly why he said no and the number he wanted instead, because it is genuinely one of the strangest financial demands in modern boxing. But first you need to understand the losing envelope, because the losing envelope is the reason we're making this video at all. A purse bid is what happens when boxing admits it cannot negotiate with itself. A sanctioning body, in this case the WBO, orders a champion to defend against a mandatory challenger. It gives both camps a window to agree terms privately. Here, that window was 20 days. If they don't agree, the sanctioning body takes the fight away from them and sells it, sealed bids, highest number wins the promotional rights. And here is the part that most fans have never had explained to them. Anyone can bid. Not just the promoters of the 2 fighters involved, anyone with a promoter's license and the money to back it. This is not theory. In 2018, a heavyweight eliminator between Kubrat Pulev and Dillian Whyte went to a purse bid. Matchroom, Whyte's own promoter, bid $831,111. Team Sauerland, Pulev's promoter, bid $801,305. Both of them lost. The winner was a company called Epic Sports and Entertainment, run by a former Don King attorney, with $1,500,111. A company that represented neither fighter bought both of their careers for an evening, and then the fight never happened at all. Whyte fought Joseph Parker instead. Pulev complained publicly and got nothing. Keep that story in your pocket. We're going to need it later because it explains something about July 30th that almost nobody reported. So, 2 envelopes in San Juan, top rank in one of them. The other envelope came from a company called Takeover Promotions. Takeover Promotions is owned by Teofimo Lopez. Not a promoter who used to fight, not a retired name lending his brand to a business card. An active professional boxer with a world title fight of his own scheduled 3 weeks later, bidding $2,350,000 to buy the promotional rights to a fight between 2 other men. Let that sit for a second. On August 22nd, Teofimo Lopez is walking to a ring in Las Vegas to have his own face punched. On July 30th, he was trying to buy the paperwork on somebody else's title fight. And it gets better. Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney were on the verge of fighting each other last year. Talks collapsed at the 11th hour when Lopez withdrew for personal reasons. So the man bidding $2.25 million to control Devin Haney's next fight is the same man who walked away from fighting Devin Haney himself. Now, why would a fighter do that? There are two honest answers, and they point in completely opposite directions. Hold on to that question because the answer only makes sense once you know what Teofimo Lopez says he has actually been paid to fight. In October of 2024, Teofimo Lopez sat down on a podcast called It Is What It Is. He was being asked whether he would take less money to fight Gervonta Davis. And instead of the usual answer, he opened his books. On the Lomachenko fight, the night he became undisputed lightweight champion of the world, the biggest win of his life, one of the biggest upsets of the decade, he said, and I'm quoting him directly, "I came home with about $460K after everything. On Josh Taylor, I came home with around $700 to $800K. And then the line that should have been a national story and instead disappeared in a week. He said he has yet to make more than $1 million in any single fight. I want to be precise about what that is and what it isn't. Those are his declared take-home figures said by him on a podcast in October of 2024. They are not athletic commission filings. We are not presenting them as audited numbers. But they are the numbers the man himself chose to put on the record, and nobody from his side has walked them back. So take the version of the story he tells. He beat Vasyl Lomachenko. He unified the lightweight division. He was for a moment the best fighter of his weight on the planet. And after purse, after taxes, after the cut for the manager, the trainer, the cutman, the camp, the sanctioning fee, $460,000. 4 years later, his company put $2,350,000 on the table to buy someone else's fight. That bid is 5.1 times what he says he brought home for the best night of his career. And that is the first real answer to the question, because a fighter who has been paid like that learns something that the people watching at home never see. He learns that the money in boxing is not in fighting. Here's the arithmetic that changes how you watch this sport. On July 30th, the money in that room split three ways: $6.4 million to the champion, $2.1 million to the challenger, and the promotional rights, the broadcast deal, the gate, the sponsorship, the streaming, everything that gets sold on top of $8.5 million to the company that wrote the check. The two men who get hit in the face are line items. The company that bought the night is the business. Teofimo Lopez was not trying to become a promoter as a hobby. He was trying to move to the side of the table where the money is structural instead of the side where it is a payment. And if that sounds cynical, consider who taught him. Consider that the promoter of Keyshawn Davis, Top Rank, wrote the winning check of $8.5 million, and under those rules, $6.4 million of it goes to Devin Haney, to the fighter they do not represent. Top Rank paid the most money in that room to hand the majority of it to another company's fighter, because the rights were worth more than the outlay. That is not a scandal, that is just what the asset is worth. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and you understand exactly why a man with a fight of his own 3 weeks away was in that auction. So Teofimo Lopez lost, Top Rank won. Devin Haney was guaranteed $6.4 million, Keyshawn Davis was guaranteed $2.1 million. And then, 24 hours later, the whole thing evaporated, which brings us to the number that killed it. Keyshawn Davis turned down $2,137,500. He rejected the 25% split. That is how ESPN reported it. He pulled out after rejecting a 25% purse split. Now, on its own, that is a defensible position. 25% for the man who has to actually beat an undefeated champion in his own promotion is a rough deal, and we'll make that case properly in a minute. But it's the counter number that makes this extraordinary. Keyshawn Davis wanted $5 million, net, after management fees. Net. That word is doing an enormous amount of work. Because to put $5 million in a fighter's pocket after the manager's cut, you need considerably more than $5 million in gross purse. But let's be generous and do the arithmetic at face value. Under the rules of this auction, the challenger receives 25% of the winning bid, so for Keyshawn Davis to be paid $5 million, the winning bid would have to be $20 million. $20 million for a fight between a welterweight champion and a challenger who has never fought at welterweight in his life. The WBO's floor for this auction was $200,000. $20 million is 100 times the floor. The actual winning bid was $8.5 million, so Davis was asking the market for roughly 2 1/3 times what the market had just told him in a sealed bid auction that the fight was worth. And here's the number that turns this from a negotiation into something else entirely. According to The Ring, Keyshawn Davis has never earned more than $1 million for a single fight in his career. He turned down more than double his career best payday because it wasn't $5 million. Now, I don't want to do the easy version of this video, so let's make his case as strongly as it can be made, because there is one. 25% is not a market rate, it is a rule. It was written by a sanctioning body, and it applies whether the fight is worth $200,000 or $41 million. And remember what that percentage meant at the bottom of the range. The WBO's minimum bid was $200,000. 25% of $200,000 is $50,000. $50,000 was Keyshawn Davis's legal floor. That was the guaranteed money the system was prepared to hand an undefeated Olympic medalist for a world title fight if nobody had bid seriously. So when a fighter looks at a mechanism that was willing to value him at $50,000 and says, "I don't trust this process to price me," he is not being irrational. He is reading the rule correctly. There's a second argument, and it's the stronger one. Keyshawn Davis has never fought at welterweight, not once. He was a lightweight champion. He moved up to 140 pounds. He is being asked to jump to 147 and face an undefeated 3-division champion in his first fight at the weight. That is not a normal ask. The risk is not symmetrical, and neither is the pay. And there's a third thing, which almost nobody says out loud. A fighter has a finite number of nights. Every one he sells cheap is a night he cannot resell later. If Davis genuinely believes he's a $5 million fighter within 2 years, taking 2.1 now is not just a small payday, it sets the ceiling for the next negotiation. That's the case for the defense. It is a real case. Hold it in one hand. Now hold this in the other. He said no to a mandatory world title shot he had already been ordered into. He said no after the auction, not before. And in boxing, that distinction is everything, which is exactly what the man who lost the auction pointed out. Teofimo Lopez had just watched his $2.35 million bid lose. He had every reason to say nothing at all. Instead, he went on the record about Keyshawn Davis, and he did not soften it. He said, quoting him, "You have to prove that you earned that money, that type of money." He called the decision, quoting him again, insane. And then he said the line that carries the whole story. Once it gets to a purse bid, if you pull out, that is a duck move. That's the accusation. Not that Davis wanted more money. Every fighter wants more money. The accusation is about the timing. Because a purse bid is not a negotiation, it's the thing that happens when negotiation has already failed. Both camps had 20 days to make a deal privately. They didn't. The WBO took the fight off them and sold it. When you let it go to auction, you are effectively agreeing to be bound by the number that comes out of the envelopes. That is the entire point of the mechanism. It exists precisely so that a fight cannot be blocked by one side refusing to sign. And then the envelopes opened, the number came out, a real number, $8.5 million, and one side walked anyway. Now, is Teofimo Lopez a neutral observer here? Absolutely not. He bid on this fight. He tried to own it. He has history with Devin Haney. He has a fight to sell in 3 weeks, and every incentive to be quoted. But being an interested party doesn't make him wrong about the mechanism, and the mechanism is what this story is actually about. Here's the part almost nobody has written about, and it's the part that tells you the most about how this sport actually works. Devin Haney won. He won the auction outcome completely. He is the champion, so he takes 75%, $6,412,500 guaranteed for a mandatory defense against a challenger moving up in weight. In the entire structure of that day, Devin Haney is the single biggest financial winner, $6.4 million for one night. He is also getting paid exactly nothing. Because a purse bid does not guarantee a fight, it assigns rights. That's the lesson from Pulev and White in 2018. A company paid $1.5 million for a fight that never happened, and the fighters were left arguing in public. The auction produces a number, it cannot produce a willing opponent. So Devin Haney is now a welterweight champion with a mandatory challenger who has declined, a target date of October 3rd with nobody to fill it, and $6.4 million guaranteed dollars that exist entirely on paper. And there is a bitter symmetry in that because of something Devin Haney's own camp said earlier this year. In July of 2026, Devin Haney claimed that the team of Gervonta Davis had offered him a 70-30 split in Gervonta's favor through Al Haymon. His camp rejected it publicly. Bill Haney, his father and manager, posted, "We already turned down 50-50 of nothing with PBC. 70-30 of nothing is even worse." I have to be careful here, and I'm going to be. Neither Gervonta Davis's team nor Al Haymon has ever confirmed those terms. No formal deal was announced. That is a claim from one side. But the sentiment is on the record, and it's unambiguous. 30% was framed as an insult not worth taking. That same month, Devin Haney became the beneficiary of a rule that hands his mandatory challenger 25%, 5 points worse than the split his own camp called unacceptable. And I want to be exact about what that does and doesn't mean. Devin Haney did not write the WBO's rules. He didn't choose the split. He is not a hypocrite for benefiting from a structure he didn't build. The point isn't about him. The point is that both of those things are true in the same sport, 3 weeks apart, and everybody involved knows exactly where they're standing on the percentage. When you're the champion, 75-25 is the rules. When you're the challenger, 30% is an insult. It is the same percentage. It depends entirely on which side of it you're on. So let's total up what 4 days in July actually produced. A sanctioning body ordered a fight. 2 camps failed to make a deal in 20 days. An auction was held. $8.5 million was committed by a real company with real money. An active fighter tried to buy the whole thing for $2.35 million and lost. The champion was assigned $6.4 million he will not receive. The challenger was assigned $2.1 million he refused. And the fight does not exist. Nobody in this story is being paid. Not the winner of the auction, not the loser of the auction, not the champion, not the challenger. The only thing that was actually produced on July 30th was a number that everybody disagreed with. And I think that's the real answer to the question we started with. What is a world championship fight worth? It's worth $8.5 million to the company that wants to sell it. It's worth $2.35 million to the fighter who wants to own it. It's worth more than $5 million to the fighter being asked to take it. It's worth $50,000 to the rulebook. Those are four completely different answers to the same question, and boxing has no mechanism that forces them to converge. It has an auction, and an auction only works when everyone in the room has already agreed to be bound by it. That's the flaw, not the percentage. The percentage is just a number. The flaw is that the mechanism has no teeth at the end of it. Which leaves one loose thread. Out of all four parties in this story, exactly one of them is walking to a ring this month. It's the one who lost the auction. On Saturday, August 22nd, 2026, at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Teofimo Lopez fights Rolando Romero for the WBA welterweight title. And this is where I have to be straight with you about who Teofimo Lopez is right now, because a lot of coverage gets it wrong. He is not a reigning world champion. He lost the WBO junior welterweight title to Shakur Stevenson on January 31st, 2026 by unanimous decision over 12 rounds. He is an active fighter and a former Undisputed champion. Those are different things, and the difference matters. His record is 22 wins, 2 losses, 13 knockouts. This is his welterweight debut. If he wins, he is a world champion in a third weight class. And the man holding that belt has a detail in his record that I find genuinely remarkable. Rolando Romero, 17 wins, 2 losses, 13 knockouts, won the vacant WBA welterweight title by beating Ryan Garcia by unanimous decision on May 3, 2025, in Times Square after putting Garcia down early. That was an enormous night, an upset in the most photographed location in America. Since that night, Rolando Romero has not defended the title. He has not fought at all. And in May of 2026, the WBA elevated him to super champion. Read that sequence again. He won a belt, he did not defend it, he did not fight, and the sanctioning body promoted him. Meanwhile, in a different weight class of the same sport, another sanctioning body was ordering a champion into a mandatory defense, running an auction when he didn't agree, and watching the whole fight collapse over the split. Same year, same sport, 2 organizations, one champion gets elevated for not fighting, one fight gets auctioned off and dies. There is no consistent rule here, there is no market. There are 4 organizations with 4 rulebooks, and the number a fighter goes home with depends less on how good he is than on which acronym happens to be sitting on his division that year. So on August 22nd, Teofimo Lopez, the man who tried to buy someone else's fight and lost, steps up in weight to challenge a champion who hasn't fought in 15 months. And whatever he is being paid for, it has not been made public, neither purse has been disclosed by any credible source, and we're not going to invent one for you. But we do know what he says the best night of his career was worth to him, $460,000. And we know what he was willing to spend to stop being the guy who gets paid that way, $2,350,000. He didn't get it. The envelope came up short, and the fight he tried to buy is dead anyway. So on the 22nd, he does the only thing that has ever actually paid him. He gets hit in the face for a living, in a division he has never fought in, against a champion the rules promoted for staying home. If you want to understand why fighters keep trying to become promoters, it isn't ego, it's the arithmetic. And once you've seen the arithmetic, every purse figure you read for the rest of the year is going to look different. Subscribe, because we follow every one of these numbers to the end, including the ones the broadcast never puts on screen. And here's what we're tracking next. There's a number attached to this sport that almost nobody outside the business has ever seen, and it doesn't appear in any purse, any bid, or any contract you've heard about today. It's the number that decides which of these fights actually gets made. We found it. That's the next one.